Kale had walked for hours under the twin suns, his feet dragging over the cracked stones of the alien city. He had always been small, weak, and unnoticed. Humans in this world were never meant to matter. The towering alien buildings rose above him like mountains, shimmering with light and color he had never seen before. Every wall, every spire, seemed alive, pulsing with energy that he could feel even from a distance. He had heard the stories, whispered in the dark alleys where humans huddled, about the palace in the center of the city. A palace so grand that even the oldest legends could not describe it fully. A palace that belonged to the Emperor of the Stars, the ruler of worlds. And at its heart there was the fountain. The fountain, they said, was no ordinary water. It glowed with colors that did not exist in nature. Some said it could heal any wound, some said it could grant strength beyond imagination. But all agreed on one warning: no human had ever touched it and survived. Still, Kale walked closer. The path was guarded by creatures taller than him, with eyes that seemed to see not just his body but his soul. Kale kept his head down, moving like a shadow, slipping past patrols with quiet steps. His heart pounded, but it was not fear that drove him. It was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could become more than what the world allowed him to be. As he entered the courtyard, the fountain came into view. It was more beautiful than he had imagined. Water spiraled upward in patterns that twisted and shimmered like living glass. The air around it hummed, filled with a warmth that made the hairs on his arms stand. He could hear it calling him, whispering in a language he could not understand, yet he felt every word in his chest. Kale's hand hovered over the water. His mind screamed warnings. Turn back, this is impossible, you are human, you cannot touch it. But his body did not listen. One hand reached out. The water was cool like nothing he had felt before. It slid over his fingers, smooth and alive. Kale cupped it, lifting it to his lips. The first sip was sweet, almost like honey, and then warmth spread through him, starting from his stomach and radiating outward. It was comforting yet terrifying. He felt every heartbeat, every pulse of life in his body, as if he were being remade from the inside. His vision blurred, and for a moment the courtyard seemed to twist and stretch. The guards, the walls, even the fountain itself shimmered as if they were not real, only echoes of a world he had never known. Then he heard it. A voice, not loud but inside his mind, clear as sunlight. You have no idea what you just became. Kale staggered back, gripping the edge of the fountain. The words echoed again, a whisper that seemed to wrap around him like a cloak. He wanted to scream, to call for help, but no sound came out. Instead he felt different, stronger, sharper. The energy of the fountain coursed through his veins, and he could feel it stretching into his fingers, his toes, every fiber of his being. He could sense the city around him, the movement of the guards, the tremor of alien machinery, even the faint hum of energy from the distant walls. It was overwhelming but thrilling. A guard noticed him then. Kale saw it clearly, the slight twitch of the alien's muscles, the moment of surprise in his eyes. The guard lunged, weapon raised, but Kale moved without thinking. The water in him responded. A small pulse of energy burst outward, and the guard froze, his weapon slipping from his hands. Kale did not understand what he had done, only that he had done it. The fear in the eyes of the alien shocked him more than the power itself. Kale took a deep breath. He had always been small, weak, invisible. But that was gone now. The voice returned, gentler this time, guiding him, showing him possibilities. Learn. Control it. Become what you were meant to be. The words were not a choice, but a command that resonated with something deep inside him. He felt the weight of history pressing down, the stories of humans who had been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. And now, perhaps, it was his turn to change that. The courtyard, once silent except for the soft gurgle of the fountain, began to shift. Kale could feel the presence of the palace itself, the stones humming with awareness. It was as if the palace watched him, judging him, testing him. He took another sip from the fountain, and this time he felt the energy flow faster, brighter, stronger. The light around him seemed to bend, reacting to his movement. Every sense he had, every nerve, was alive in a way he had never imagined. He could hear whispers from far-off corridors, the footsteps of guards miles away, even the distant chatter of alien advisors in chambers he had never entered. Kale's mind raced. What was happening to him? What had he become? Fear mingled with excitement, and he realized he could no longer turn back. This was the first step into a world humans were never meant to enter. And yet, for the first time in his life, Kale did not feel small. He did not feel weak. He felt alive, powerful, awake. The voice faded, leaving only the memory of its warning echoing. You have no idea what you just became. Kale stepped back from the fountain, his heart racing, his senses tingling. The palace gates loomed before him, the guards now cautious, unsure as if they sensed the change too. The human who had once been nothing was now something new, something the universe had not expected. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders and stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. Kale's body still tingled from the fountain's water. Every step he took felt different, lighter, almost as if he was moving through air instead of stone. He could feel the energy of the palace pulsing beneath his feet, sending tiny shivers up his legs. It was not just power, he felt alive in a way he had never imagined. Every sound, every movement, every shadow was sharper, clearer. The palace was no longer just a building, it was alive and he could sense it breathing, watching, waiting. He turned a corner into a long hallway. Normally, such halls would be empty, silent except for distant footsteps. Today, Kale could hear whispers carried through the walls, conversations happening in rooms he could not even see. The voices were faint, almost like echoes in a dream, but he could understand them. Words, intentions, emotions, all became clear. The humans he had once lived among had been small, hidden. Here, in the palace, he realized humans were always dismissed because no one knew what they could become. But now, Kale could sense the power within himself. A patrol appeared ahead, moving in formation, unaware of his presence. Kale studied them carefully. He could see the tension in their muscles, the flicker of suspicion in their eyes, the pattern of their thoughts. It was strange, unsettling, yet exhilarating. He could control the energy in the fountain, he thought, so perhaps he could control this as well. He extended his hand slightly, not even thinking. A faint pulse of energy left him, invisible yet strong. The nearest guard froze, his weapon sliding from his grip, eyes wide in shock. Kale stumbled back, amazed. The power felt natural, as if it had always been part of him. Fear was there, yes, but it was mixed with excitement. He had never felt so alive. The voice returned, soft and guiding inside his mind. You are not just human. You are something more. Learn to control it. Understand it. He tried to focus, centering himself. The pulse of energy returned, this time under his control. He could see it spread along the walls, flowing around the guards, harmless but undeniable. They looked around in confusion, unsure what had stopped them. Kale's mind raced. This was more than strength. It was connection, understanding, awareness. He realized he could sense the intentions of others, even influence them if he tried. The thought made him shiver. He was no longer the weak human who had sneaked into the palace. He was something the world had never seen before. Kale walked further into the palace, testing his new abilities. Light seemed to bend around him slightly, shadows moving differently as he passed. He could feel the fountain's energy in every corner, and it was as if the palace itself responded to his presence. The guards that tried to follow him slowed without reason, lost in invisible currents of energy. Kale could see the fear in their eyes, hear the confusion in their thoughts, and he realized that power alone was not enough. He needed control, focus. He paused in a grand chamber, high ceilings arched above him, walls covered with symbols of alien history. The energy in the room felt older, stronger, more dangerous. Kale stepped carefully, feeling it flow around him, alive, like a river under the stone floors. A voice whispered again, almost like a warning. This is only the beginning. What you have drunk will not wait. It will grow with you and it will demand more. Kale nodded, though no one was there to see. He understood. The fountain's water had changed him, but it was not done. It wanted him to learn, to adapt, to become more than a human, more than a weak creature who had only survived by hiding. He tried to focus again, reaching out to the energy in the room. At first, it resisted, pulsing unpredictably, almost violent. But Kale felt it respond, slowly, like a reluctant current finding its path. The walls shimmered slightly, the lights bent, and Kale realized he was bending the palace itself to his awareness. A sudden noise broke the silence, a door opening, footsteps approaching. Kale froze, then realized he could sense them before they appeared. 3 palace warriors entered, their eyes narrowing at the shimmering energy around him. Normally they would have attacked immediately. Today they hesitated, unsure what they saw. Kale focused. A small wave of his energy washed over them. Their thoughts slowed, fear creeping in. He could hear them wondering how a human could wield such power. Kale's chest filled with a strange mixture of pride and caution. The power was intoxicating, yes, but dangerous. He was learning, but he was still human, still fragile in ways he did not fully understand. The voice spoke again, guiding him, teaching him, warning him. Power without control destroys. Learn, adapt, survive. You are the first of your kind. Kale took a deep breath. He raised his hands slowly, feeling the energy respond, flowing through him like a living current. The warriors moved backward without a fight, their fear clear. Kale understood something important then. He was no longer just a human. He was something more, something new. The fountain had awakened something within him that no human had ever had, and now it was his responsibility to understand it, to control it, to survive in a world that would never expect what he had become. As Kale moved deeper into the palace, the air seemed to hum with anticipation. He could hear the whispers of the fountain in every corner, the silent pulse of the walls, the subtle tremor of the ground beneath him. The palace, which had always been a place of order and fear, now seemed alive, aware of him, testing him. Kale smiled, a small, determined smile. He did not know what he had become fully, but he knew one thing clearly: he would not be powerless ever again. The world had always underestimated humans, but Kale was about to show them that even a single human could change everything. Kale's steps echoed through the palace halls, but they were not ordinary echoes. The palace itself seemed to respond to him, the walls vibrating faintly, the lights flickering as if curious. He could feel the eyes of the building on him, and even more, he could sense the presence of the palace's rulers. They were powerful, ancient, and they had always thought humans were weak. Now Kale was proof that they had been wrong. Far above, in the throne room, the emperor had sensed the disturbance. His eyes, sharp and piercing, narrowed as he felt the ripple of energy through the palace. Something was changing. Something human. The emperor had ruled for centuries, and he had never encountered a human with power. And yet, here it was, moving through his halls, unseen but undeniable. He rose slowly from his throne, his long robes brushing the floor, and the air seemed heavier with his presence. The palace guards whispered nervously among themselves, sensing the shift in the currents of energy, though none could name its source. Kale moved cautiously but with a new confidence. He could feel the palace energy pulsing with him, almost as if the building was alive, testing him. Every step he took seemed to carry weight, even when he barely touched the ground. He passed a hallway lined with massive doors, each carved with symbols older than memory. Behind one door, a guard appeared, startled. Kale could see the fear in his eyes before he moved. He focused subtly, sending a pulse of the fountain's energy through the air. The guard froze, his weapon dropping to the floor without a sound. Kale did not even have to think of harming him. Control, the voice reminded him. Power without control is dangerous. The palace was waking up to him. It was subtle at first, a flicker of lights, a hum in the walls, the faint vibration of the floors. Then it became clear. Every creature, every guard, every servant in the palace was aware something had changed. Kale could hear them not just with his ears but with his mind. Thoughts drifted into him, a confusing swirl of fear, awe, and disbelief. He had never imagined humans could be like this. He had never imagined he could be like this. Kale paused in a large chamber, its ceiling so high he could barely see it. Columns carved from alien stone lined the sides, and tapestries depicting ancient battles hung between them. Normally, such a hall would be silent, but today it vibrated with life. Kale could sense the energy moving around him, responding to his presence. He extended his hand slightly, and the pulse of the fountain's power spread through the room, bending shadows and light as if he were painting with invisible strokes. Suddenly, a patrol of elite warriors appeared at the end of the hall. Their armor shimmered with strange energy, and their eyes glowed faintly. They had been sent to investigate the disturbance, but Kale was no longer afraid. He could see the hesitation in their minds, the question forming. What is this human? Who is he? They advanced slowly, their weapons ready yet unsure. Kale's pulse of energy stretched toward them, a gentle push. The warriors froze, uncertainty rooting them in place. He could feel their thoughts, their doubt, their confusion. This was new. Humans were never meant to wield such force. Kale took a step forward. The palace seemed to pulse in response, a rhythm like a heartbeat that matched his own. He realized the fountain had awakened more than power, it had awakened connection. He could feel the life of the palace itself, its energy flowing through corridors, rooms, and walls. The emperor would sense it soon. Kale smiled faintly. For centuries, humans had been considered weak. Now he was proof that even one human could change the balance of power. The voice returned in his mind, soft but insistent. They have noticed. The palace sees you now. Do not panic. Control, always control. Your power is new, but your mind must lead it. Kale nodded, though the voice could not see him. He focused on the energy, letting it flow naturally like water in a stream. The warriors stepped back, their fear evident, and Kale understood that fear could be a weapon too. From above, the emperor's presence descended upon the halls. Kale could feel it like a weight pressing down on him, testing him. He stopped, raising his hands slightly, feeling the energy respond to his attention. The guards at the sides hesitated, some dropping to their knees, others staring in disbelief. Kale was no longer a human to them. He was a force they could not comprehend, something beyond their understanding, something dangerous. Kale's thoughts raced. He was learning fast, but he still had much to understand. The palace itself was a tool, a weapon, and a challenge. It had been built by beings older and wiser than he could imagine, yet it bent subtly to him now, acknowledging his presence. He could feel the whispers of the walls, the pulse of the floors, even the tiny currents of air. Everything was connected, and the fountain's power allowed him to sense it. He stepped carefully, moving toward the center of the palace, toward the grand hall that led to the emperor. Each step resonated, each movement bending light and shadow subtly. Kale's mind was alive, focused, and curious. He knew that the palace would not remain unaware for long. Soon, the emperor would confront him, and then Kale would have to decide: fight, hide, or prove that humans were not to be underestimated. The hallway opened into a vast atrium, where the ceiling seemed to touch the stars. Kale paused, feeling the energy thrumming through him. This was more than power, it was awareness, understanding, and potential. The palace had noticed him, yes, but it was not just fear, it was acknowledgement. Kale was no longer invisible. Humans were no longer beneath notice. He had become something new, something no one expected. A shiver ran through him as the voice whispered again, almost like a warning. Soon you will meet the one who rules all. Be ready. What you have become will be tested. Kale took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had stepped into a world that had always dismissed his kind. Now he would show it that even a single human could awaken power the universe had not foreseen. He advanced, careful but unafraid, toward the hall where the emperor waited. The palace had noticed. The world was noticing. And Kale, human no longer in the way he once was ready to face what came next. The grand hall stretched before Kale like a cathedral of stars. Light shimmered along its walls, reflecting off crystal panels and intricate carvings that told stories of emperors, battles, and victories. Every corner of the palace seemed alive, pulsing with energy he could feel through his veins. Kale's heartbeat matched the rhythm of the building, steady and strong. He was no longer the human who had crept in silently. He was something new, something powerful, and the palace knew it. Above him, on a raised throne of black stone and silver, the emperor appeared. He was taller than any human could imagine, with eyes like molten metal that burned into Kale's mind. His robes seemed to float, and every movement carried the weight of centuries. Kale felt the sheer presence of the emperor like a physical force, pressing against him, testing him, daring him to challenge it. The emperor's gaze swept over Kale, stopping on him, and Kale felt the centuries of contempt for humans burn like fire in that look. You dare enter my palace? The emperor's voice rumbled, echoing through the hall. It was not just sound, it carried weight as if the words themselves could bend reality. Kale stood firm, his body still tingling with the energy of the fountain. He felt it coursing through him, alive and responsive, ready to act. The emperor's guards shifted, unsure whether to attack or hold their positions. Something in the air told them that even the slightest move could be dangerous. Kale's mind raced. He did not fully understand his power yet, but he could feel it in every fiber of his being. The voice from the fountain whispered guidance, calm and insistent. Focus. Control. Show them who you are without fear. Kale raised his hands slowly, letting the energy ripple outward, like water spreading across a still pond. The air shimmered and the guards paused, frozen in surprise. Kale felt the pulse of the palace itself responding, bending subtly to him. The emperor leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. What are you? He demanded, his voice sharp as lightning. A human? Impossible. You should be weak, fragile, invisible. Kale's lips parted, and for the first time he spoke, not with fear, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had been reborn. I am what you never expected, he said. I am human. And more. A ripple of tension ran through the hall. The guards whispered nervously among themselves, but Kale ignored them. The energy from the fountain flowed through him, ready to respond to his thoughts. He could feel every heartbeat, every twitch, every thought around him. The emperor's power was immense, but Kale's connection to the fountain gave him something unique. It was not just strength, it was awareness, speed, and clarity that no one had ever seen in a human before. The emperor raised a hand and the room responded. A wave of energy shot toward Kale, bending the air and stirring the dust on the floors. Kale focused. He felt the energy approach like a storm, and with a thought, he redirected it, sending it outward in a ripple that pushed the guards back. They cried out in alarm, their weapons clattering to the floor. Kale's pulse quickened, excitement mingling with caution. He was learning fast. He was adapting. "You cannot control me," the Emperor said, his voice low but deadly. "No human can." Kale felt a shiver of challenge. He had never faced anything like this, yet he did not falter. He drew on the fountain's energy, letting it flow through him naturally, as if it were part of his own body. A wave of light spread from him, bending shadows along the walls, rippling the reflections in the crystal panels. The Emperor's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of surprise Kale had ever seen from him. Kale took a cautious step forward. The floor beneath him hummed with the palace's energy, matching the rhythm of the fountain's pulse. The guards froze, unsure whether to attack, flee, or simply watch. Kale could feel their fear, their disbelief, their awe. The Emperor leaned forward, his expression unreadable, and Kale realized something incredible. The balance of power had shifted. The palace, the empire, even the Emperor himself had underestimated humans. Kale was proof that they were wrong. With another step, Kale extended his hands. A ripple of energy shot outward, bending light and shadow across the hall. The Emperor's guards cried out again, but they could not touch him. Kale felt the energy obey his thoughts, flowing where he willed it. He could feel the building, the hall, even the air itself responding to him. The Emperor's eyes burned with a mixture of rage and curiosity. No human had ever wielded such force, and yet here he stood, calm, focused, and unafraid. The Emperor rose from his throne, every movement deliberate, powerful. "You are not a human," he said, his voice echoing like thunder. "You are something else." Kale smiled faintly. He did not know exactly what he had become, only that he was stronger than he had ever imagined. "Maybe," he said, "but I am still human. And humans are not to be dismissed." For a moment the hall was silent. Energy pulsed around them, quiet but tense, like the calm before a storm. Kale could feel the palace itself holding its breath. The guards were frozen, the Emperor uncertain, and Kale realized the fountain's gift had given him more than power. It had given him presence, awareness, and the ability to change how the universe saw humans. The Emperor's expression softened slightly, almost as if respect were mingled with his anger. "Perhaps we underestimated you," he said. Kale nodded. He did not lower his guard. The hall was still dangerous and the palace was still testing him. But for the first time Kale felt confident, alive, and unstoppable. Humans had always been overlooked, dismissed, and weak. Today that had changed. Kale stepped closer to the throne, feeling the pulse of the fountain still alive within him. The voice whispered again, soft and guiding, "This is only the beginning. The world will test you. Be ready. Control, always control." Kale took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had faced the Emperor, stood his ground, and learned that humans could be more than anyone imagined. The palace had noticed, and so had the universe. Kale was no longer ordinary. He was something new, something powerful. And he knew that the real journey had just begun. Kale stood in the heart of the palace, the fountain's energy still coursing through his veins. The grand hall, once a place of fear and authority, now seemed to bend subtly to his presence. Every wall, every column, every whisper of air responded to him. The guards and servants who had watched him with suspicion now stared in awe, unsure how to react. Kale could sense their thoughts, their hesitation, their fear, and even a spark of respect. He was no longer just a human wandering into a world that dismissed his kind. He had become something new, something the palace, and perhaps the universe, had never seen before. The Emperor remained seated, observing him quietly. Kale could feel the weight of the ruler's gaze, heavy with centuries of experience and authority. Yet for the first time Kale did not feel small. He did not feel weak. He felt alive, powerful, aware of the true potential that had been hidden in humans for generations. The voice from the fountain whispered once more, gentle and guiding, "You have awakened. The world has noticed. Now it is time to understand what you have become." Kale took a step forward, his senses stretched wide. He could feel the life in every corner of the palace, the faint hum of energy in the walls, the heartbeat of every living creature, even the tiny currents of air moving around him. He realized he could influence them, guide them, and connect with them in ways he had never imagined. It was a dizzying realization, but one that filled him with determination. Humans had always been underestimated. Now he was proof that even one human could alter the balance of power in an empire that spanned worlds. A servant approached cautiously, carrying a small crystal of water. Kale could feel her fear and awe, and he raised his hand slightly. The energy from the fountain pulsed, a gentle wave that reassured her rather than harmed. She froze for a moment, then nodded slightly, understanding that Kale was not an enemy. This was the first human who could command not just attention but trust in the palace. The Emperor's voice broke the silence, deep and deliberate. "Human," he said, "you have changed more than you realize. You carry the energy of the fountain, but that is only part of it. What you have become is beyond my understanding." Kale bowed his head slightly, not in submission but in acknowledgement. He had expected fear, perhaps anger, maybe even an attempt to destroy him. Instead, the Emperor's words carried a mix of respect, curiosity, and caution. Kale's mind wandered to the world beyond the palace. Humans had always been weak, pushed aside, overlooked. Yet now, he carried a power that could challenge even the mightiest alien dynasties. The fountain had awakened potential not just in his body, but in his mind, his awareness, his very essence. The universe had never seen a human like this before, and perhaps it never would again. For the first time, Kale understood what the voice had meant. "You have no idea what you just became." He raised his hands again, letting the energy flow naturally, testing his limits. The palace responded instantly. Lights shimmered, shadows moved, and even the very air seemed to hum with recognition. Guards instinctively stepped back, some bowing slightly, others frozen in disbelief. Kale realized that the fountain's power had not only changed him physically but had also altered how the world perceived him. Humans were no longer invisible, no longer weak, no longer insignificant. Kale had become the living proof of human potential. The Emperor stood, his massive presence filling the hall. He approached Kale slowly, deliberately. "You are a human," he said, "yet you are unlike any human I have known. You wield power that should not exist in your kind. You are dangerous, but fascinating." Kale met his gaze steadily. There was no fear, only the quiet certainty of someone who had discovered his true strength. "I am human," Kale replied, "and that will never change. But I am also more than your world expects. You will learn that humans are not to be ignored." The palace seemed to hum in agreement, as if the building itself acknowledged Kale's words. The Emperor nodded slightly and the tension in the room eased, though the sense of awe remained. Kale realized that he had shifted the balance of authority, not through violence, but through presence, awareness, and the power that had awakened within him. He was no longer a human who stumbled into a palace. He was a force that demanded attention, respect, and caution. Kale walked through the halls, feeling the energy of the palace respond to him. He could sense the intentions of those around him, hear their thoughts, and even subtly guide their actions if he wished. He understood that true power was not in destroying others, but in controlling himself, in understanding the flow of energy, in connecting with the world in ways no human had ever imagined. The palace, the Emperor, the guards, they all understood now that Kale was no ordinary human. He had become something extraordinary. In the quiet of a side chamber, Kale paused and looked at the fountain once more. The water shimmered as if alive, reflecting his image back at him. He remembered the first sip, the warmth, the rush of energy, and the voice that had warned him. Now he understood its meaning. The fountain had not merely given him strength. It had awakened potential, awareness, and destiny. Humans had always been underestimated, but Kale had become proof that one human could change everything. Kale's journey was far from over. The Emperor, the palace, the universe, they would continue to test him. But Kale was ready. He had power, yes, but also control. He had courage, yes, but also awareness. The world had dismissed humans for centuries, but Kale would show that humanity was capable of far more than anyone had imagined. The fountain's gift was only the beginning. As Kale stepped away from the fountain, the palace seemed to settle around him, acknowledging his presence, recognizing his change. He walked through the grand halls with quiet confidence, feeling alive in a way he never had before. The universe would remember this day. Humans were no longer the weak, unseen species of legend. Through Kale they had become a force to be reckoned with. The voice's words echoed again in his mind, softer now, filled with quiet pride. "You have no idea what you just became." Kale smiled faintly. He did not need to know everything yet. He only needed to continue forward. The palace, the empire, and the stars themselves were watching. And he, a human who had drunk from the fountain, was ready to meet the new reality he had awakened.